Hello and welcome to this first edition of the Layover Deep Dive. In this episode, we'll be discussing a killer, icing. Join us to find out all about this phenomenon and how crew and passengers can intervene to save lives. As your commander for this evening's trip, welcome on board.
One life for the revolution. Rise up and unite. Woo! Rise up.
Good evening, Mark. Welcome.
Evening,
Thanks
How
for
are you?
joining me. Thanks for joining me on this inaugural episode of the Layover Deep Dive.
Inaugural.
Inaugural. Sorry, yeah, it's too much wine. You know that.
And it's just me. It's just me because Lindsay's up in Scotland.
Oh, that's fine. I don't think anybody minds. This is the deep dive where we're going to dive into a little bit about stuff we know a little bit about. Maybe.
Yeah, that's the deal, isn't it? So basically, if we've done it, we're comfortable to talk about it. If not, we'll get a guest
who knows a bit more than we do, which is, in my case, most of the time. In the next 20 minutes or so, hopefully we can explain to the wide mass of viewers out there how icing can down an aircraft and why we, as pilots, work so hard to prevent that.
Yeah.
Also, how the viewers can play a part if they see something that they're not comfortable with on an airplane, which is really important. And not many people think that actually we all have a part to play in the safety of the airplane, not just the crew, but the passengers as well. So, Mark, kick us off.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll put a bit of context behind it because we've got a little bit of a video, and it was on social media. It does the rounds occasionally, this video. And there were some really unusual comments, certainly very surprising comments to me, because I think quite a few people maybe don't appreciate how fragile, delicate a kind of aeroplane and its technology is. So why don't we have a look at the video? Wow, indeed. I think most professional pilots, they're going to agree, say that's not an ideal situation. The thing you can't see, obviously, is symmetry. It's just one wing, so you don't know what's going on in the other wing if it's doing exactly the same. But yes, quite a few of the comments we saw, I think people were saying it was no different to having a bit of snow on top of your car. It will just slide off. So, what's the harm? What is the harm, Scotty?
Well, actually, Mark, I think to understand the harm, we need to go back to flight school. And we all like going back to flight school, don't we? So before we add icing to the mix, as it were, there are four forces which act on an airplane. We all know about these. So there is lift, thrust, drag, and weight. So all of these act together. Wing gets pushed along through the air by thrust, overcomes the weight and the drag, and somehow produces lift. So
that's a great explanation.
It is, but it's magic. It's magic how it works. So as far as I'm concerned, and this is me simplifying it because I like simple stuff, the blue dots are the same blue dots. They're traveling from the front of the wing to the back of the wing. To travel the same distance, i.e. the blue dot on the top has to go slightly faster to meet up with the same red dot at the back, which produces a low pressure on the top, slightly higher or the same pressure on the bottom, which produces lift. So that pressure differential is what produces the lift.
And we know that this explanation is disputed, so don't at us. But effectively, the point is you're making, Scott, is the shape is the important thing.
It is. The camber on the top of the wing is the important thing, which causes the lift. And that very smooth camber. It is amazing. But
So-
what happened?
Yeah. What happens? That was the question I was going to ask. Let's add some ice.
Yeah, well, let's add some ice to that. And very simply, adding a bit of ice, well, maybe the thrust will decrease because actually your engine isn't working as efficiently as it would be. It's definitely going to add weight to the airplane. So you're not going to be able to get as much lift, although it will be producing the same. The resultant force won't be the same. But obviously it increases the drag massively because of things called foam drag, which we can talk about later. But in essence, ice is really bad.
It's bad on most of those axes, isn't it? That's the point. Is it?
It is.
It's a bit of a negative on all of them.
So the icing phenomenon. Now, due to the fact that water doesn't necessarily turn to ice at or just below zero, it can remain liquid actually at below zero, which is bizarre to many people when it's called supercooled water droplets.
Blows my mind.
It blows my mind as well. I don't understand the science, so again, don't at us about that. But supercooled drops, those droplets are unstable. This means when they're hit by an object, in this case, the wing, if it has a negative temperature, that's how icing occurs. And that's it. Then the lovely wing shape changes. The effect of the icing on the airfoil changes its shape. That lovely curve that we saw reduces its ability to produce lift. And then that whole lift, drag, balance thing, as we saw, all changes massively. It slows the aircraft down, and potentially the higher weight, less lift will increase the stall speed, making it really, really dangerous. So I understand that icing is a danger to the balance of the forces that will allow the aircraft to stay airborne, but surely, Mark, a bit of frost won't make a difference.
Well, you'd have thought that, wouldn't you? You'd have thought, and this is what I was saying earlier, really, about how delicate aeroplanes are. So a little bit of hoarfrost. So I think we've got some nice pickies actually coming up. It's a bit of hoarfrost. In fact, I think that looks a bit like it's a bit of snow maybe that's adhered to the aeroplane. You know, you think, well, it's broadly the same shape. You know, how bad can that be? NASA effectively have shown they did loads of icing trials over the years, and they showed that frost can also act as a kind of an agent. So not only does it destroy the shape, but it can actually be the thing that all the other droplets, etc., adhere to, and that then you then go from bad to worse, where it's building up and up and up. These shapes, these are interesting. These usually form in flight, actually, and that's like a moon arc. Some of these things are called, or a double horn. The Airbus, my Airbus, not yours, has a little ice probe, and very often you get a triangle of ice on that. But the triangle part points the other way to the way you'd think it would be. You'd think it'd be the narrow bit at the front, and the thick bit, and it goes the other way because the way the airflow's sort of pushing the droplets. It's extraordinary.
And I know I'm going a bit off topic here, but I was astounded by these. I'd seen pictures of them before, and whilst I've been doing the research for this, I understand now why they form in that direction. So effectively, that wing is flying at us out of the screen here, and the ice is actually forming forwards.
Yes.
Rather than the other way around. This isn't the back end of the wing, it's the front end of the wing. It's just nature is odd, but it's so beautiful and dangerous.
I know we've moved on from having snow falling in the airplane and wings that need to be clean, but the upshot of your NASA studies was the only simple, safe way of describing how much ice you're allowed is should be none. Clean wing, what's known as a clean wing policy, so clear wing, no ice at all. That's the deal. So there we go.
All right, Mark, I'm going to come back to clean wing and de-icing and anti-icing in a moment. But a few of the comments that I noticed on the video said snow was no problem as the outside air temperature was below -40.
Mm-hmm.
And ice doesn't form at that temperature, bizarrely, which we know to be true. Mark, what are they talking about? It's -40 at the North Pole. And I've seen ice at the North Pole and polar bears. So give us some context.
Oh, are polar bears at the North Pole? I can't remember.
I can't remember. Yeah, I think they are.
So, I guess there's some validity to that statement. You get these very cold temperatures, you end up with this kind of granulated ice. I remember doing walk rounds in -35, and you get these little pellets of ice kind of pinging on you, and your nose hairs freeze and all sorts of things like that. It's pretty amazing. But actually, the video that we saw, it was very clear to me that was somewhere between 0 and probably -10, -15, something like that. And it looked like the aeroplane was warm underneath it, or had been warm as well. There were patches missing over fuel tanks and so on. So icing normally occurs sort of just above 0, bizarrely, down to about -20. You can, like the super cooled stuff that you talked about, that'll go down to about -40. But in general, we're talking about how ice forms there in flight. So with the wing being pushed along through the air, not sitting there with stacks of snow on the wing, because that's a different thing entirely. You're just being snowed on. So if we agree that the outside air temperature is -40 and it's snowing, it probably wouldn't be accumulating snow in that way. It'd probably be these funny little granules that'd be all sliding off. Anyway, if it was, the likelihood is if that airplane's flown in from somewhere, the airplane's a bit warmer than that. That's going to be you've got fuel as well, which is massive. So it has mass, and that snow is going to sort of then get warmed up, and then you might get a little bit of refreezing underneath. That's going to create a layer of ice underneath. The whole thing is a total nightmare, which is why you've got to get through that layer of snow and down to the ice underneath and get rid of that, and off it goes. And what I can tell you, and I know you very rarely operate in icing conditions, you long haul boys. But a day of operating in Europe, or a week, or a month sometimes, with multiple sectors a day, where you're trying to get through all of this sector after sector, trying to clear the aeroplane of ice. It is hard work, and it takes a bit of judgment. So there we go.
So, Mark, I wholeheartedly agree with you about the icing. I'm just going to, if you don't mind, just going to show that video again for a second.
Yeah, let's have a little look at that again.
And let people now have a look at the video, watch the snow coming off, and they can actually see the ice underneath it. So we'll just have a little look at that clip. Certainly not a clean wing, is it? And I think with the context of what we've just discussed, I think I and hopefully others now understand why icing is a problem.
Yeah.
When it's likely to happen, and why being on the ground may be different, hopefully, to being in the air.
Yeah.
But Mark, let's talk about, I mean, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but let's talk about the systems that the aircraft has to protect itself from icing. I saw a social media comment, and I shouldn't laugh because it actually makes sense. We
Yeah.
do have an anti-icing button, don't we? But actually, it doesn't warm the entire wing up, and it doesn't make all that ice disappear.
Yeah,
It isn't that simple, is it?
Yeah, and I can see why people think that. I mean, I've got a Land Rover sitting out there. There's got a big button that defrosts all the windows and does all sorts of clever stuff like that. And we don't have. There's no such thing. We do. Yes, we have warm windows for lots of different reasons. One of them is to prevent just regular misting and frosting at altitude. Nothing to do with snow and ice down on the ground. But the anti-icing systems on the airplane, they're effectively only on the front of the wing, only in certain bits, because some bits of the airplane don't pick up ice in flight, certainly to an extent that affects the airplane. We just don't have there is no such thing as a button that just sheds the airplane of ice. Now, there's lots of different systems. We're going to talk about a few different systems for getting rid of the ice in flight. But I think we're going to sort of move ourselves to Canada to talk about those things. Is that the plan?
Oh, hopefully. So, Mark, you are going to describe these systems to me, but I am the commander on tonight's mission. It's not you tonight. It's me.
Really?
Yeah. And here I am at we're close to Canada. We're at a very snowy JFK.
Oh, okay. That looks like JFK. Yeah.
Yeah. It's minus 10. Yeah. I do like JetBlue, actually. They're a great airline. It's minus 10 outside. And what kind of icing de-icing we do largely depends on the environmental conditions, doesn't it? Whether there are deposits on the wing, if it is or it isn't snowing, is there a chance of it snowing between us pushing back and taking off? If there's only small deposits on the wing, we might elect to do a little bit of de-icing rather than have the whole airplane de-icing. And the ground crew can help us, can't they? So the ground crew can help us by saying, well, actually, chaps, there is no snow. It's pretty cold. There is no snow. We could actually do some anti-icing, de-icing before you turn up.
Yeah. I'm just breaking with what we were going to chat about. If you turn up at the airport, Scotty, and you see that out the window,
I'm probably going to go back to the hotel.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we don't have that option. Right. But what kind of day do you think you're going to have?
A very slow one. And I think that's what people get frustrated with. They see this and they think, why is a little bit of a snow problem with aircraft? And everything has to go slower because the ramp teams have to work slower because of the danger to themselves, slipping. And then you obviously can't de-ice whilst other stuff is going on around the aircraft. And at many places, you have to go somewhere completely different to de-ice, which can often take more time. And people get frustrated with that. And that's understandable. We get frustrated with it as well. But we are doing it for a reason. And that reason is safety. And it's worth taking the extra 20, 30, 40 minutes, however long it takes. These are smaller airplanes. Larger airplane like a 350 or a jumbo can take up to 40 minutes to do a de-ice properly, from shutdown, wheels stop to wheels moving. So it can be very frustrating, but we are doing it for a reason. And hopefully by educating our viewers, they will understand in the future why it takes so long.
And is it worth talking about the difference between de-ice and anti-ice?
Oh, I think that'd be good. Do you want to talk about that? Yeah.
Okay. So in general, and what you've got there, see that green gunky stuff? That is the anti-icing fluid. It comes in a couple of different flavors, almost literally, and sometimes it can all be conducted in one step. But this fluid, first of all, de-icing is about getting rid of the snow. That is about getting rid of snow, ice, and going back to that clean wing. So it gives you no real what's known as holdover protection. Doesn't stop anything forming, just knocks stuff off. It's typically applied with a jet, literally like a hose pipe, and then there we go. And then that sort of finer spray is where they're going to apply the anti-icing step. And the anti-icing step, what that does is lay on the wing. The fluid lays on the wing or even the fuselage, and effectively it dilutes the snow and precipitation that falls on the wing and stops it freezing. And obviously it can only do that for a certain period of time. Then it ends up with too much water in it and it will start to refreeze. So we have all sorts of tables and things that tell us how much time we're likely to have. But if you've ever been on an airplane taxiing out and they say, sorry, we've run out of time, we've got to go back and do all this again, typically you've reached the end of that time. The fluid's very clever. It's the kind of fluid that it will sit almost like a gel on the top of the wing. But then as you start to move, it's designed to shear and just slide off the wing. So that is the one thing that is designed to slide off the wing, is the fluid. Type 4, you'll hear people talk about type 4. But yeah, it's amazing stuff. How much fluid? Scotty, you're going to tell how much fluid on a 350?
Go on. This actually, I didn't know. If I'm being honest, I've sat there many a time at Washington and Toronto, and that's probably the only places we've de-iced the 350. Waiting for them to do all this, and you often see them on. We're very lucky; we've got cameras on the 350. You can see them spraying this stuff everywhere. Take a rough guess. Liters. How many liters?
I don't know. 10,000.
No, not as much. It's 5,000 liters.
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
I went for a ridiculous number, and it was only half that.
Yeah, but it normally averages around a cost of about £4 per litre, depending on the fluid you're using. So very roughly, finger in the air, that's 20k to do the full de-ice, anti-ice on a wide body. So if if it were not required, airlines would not be doing this because it costs a lot of money. But it is required because it's the safe thing to do, and that's why there is no cost on safety.
Bit of a shout out to the teams who are doing this. Remember, they're working in abysmal conditions. It's all right. If you're having this stuff applied, it's always horrible. You're in foul weather gear. Your windows are iced up and so on. I'm always amazed when I go to Scandinavia how good they are at this stuff. They almost seem to enjoy it. And it's difficult. The wing itself is curved. So sometimes if we, miss a bit, it's because the curve of the wing makes it very difficult to see or to get to, or, it's tough.
Yeah, and
that is a tough job.
And it's very often snowing when they're doing this. And when it looks like the airplane is engulfed in steam, and because the fluid is warm. Fluid is warmed up as well to go onto the surface, which is really cool. So, Mark, we've covered de-icing and anti-icing on the ground.
Yeah.
The fact that we don't have this magic switch that just sorts out the entire wing, which is pretty cool. We do have a switch, though. This is the switch on the A350. 2 switches, left and right.
Yeah.
Let's say anti-ice, wing left, wing right. So what do they do? If it's not a magic switch, what do they actually do?
Yeah, okay. So thermal anti-ice, and we use these much more regularly than perhaps you might think. So any cloud below 10 degrees, we're going to pop those on. And the little metal lip at the front of the engine, that gets filled up with hot air that's tapped off of the engine, and it effectively stops ice forming and then falling into the engine. And causing the engine to cough and bang, or even potentially stop. I think you've got a great pic of a fan that's properly iced up on the ground.
Yeah, I do, but I've got this, which that's just what you were talking about, wasn't it? Really?
You're talking about the wing leading edge. Okay, so I
Uh,
was talking about engine
oh,
and so
sorry.
wings very similar. Still uses hot air. It's still just the front on my airplane. It's just the outer 3 panels, which is
Oh, really?
about half the width of each wing, half the wingspan of each wing, just outboard of the engine. So it's really not very much, and that's all the airplane needs to keep flying. And so what we need people to hold in their minds is there's a difference between airplane in flight moving through the air a couple of 100 miles an hour and airplane on the ground getting snowed on, which is an entirely different deal.
I thought this was amazing. It was called the Piccolo tube. I didn't
A
know
piccolo
that.
tube. There we are.
Yeah, I
There we
never
are.
knew
And
that.
other de-icing methods are available. I think we're going to show some de-icing boots.
Well, sorry, I was going to go back to this because it was my fault. I skipped ahead. Sorry, this is your engine and your fan blades.
Yeah.
That would not be a good day.
No, because of course, number one, that's probably going to stop the engine spinning round when you need it to spin round. So we can't try and start the thing like that. And the other thing is that they can't just fire that gloop in there.
Why not?
Because that wouldn't that wouldn't be very good for the engine. Typically, and places where this happens a lot in Scandinavia and so on, they have big warm air heaters, fan heaters, literally fan heaters to heat the fan, to blow hot air through the engine and de-ice it. But getting fans de-iced, and sometimes they build up ice on taxiing on the blade faces, which is on the back, and that's hard work as well. But yeah, so I keep saying it's hard work. I sound terribly negative. It is a very, very entertaining day out when you're dealing with this stuff, but it takes time.
Yeah, I've actually had fan blade icing, and in the US, actually in Washington, and what happened was it was freezing rain.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
That kind of pulled a little bit in the bottom of the engine, and actually it was the engineer who spotted it was actually freezing the blades, so the blades wouldn't have turned at the bottom of the engine.
Yeah.
It had probably broken off, but it was a really good spot by them, and they brought out literally a massive tube full of hot air, and 20 minutes later it was all gone. It was really clever. Really clever.
Yeah, rain ice is a very, very, very interesting phenomenon. So that's typically a frontal zone that's producing ice falling over a cold air mass, and as the rain drops through it, it gets cooled down and cooled down and cooled down, and then when it hits your airplane, it turns into super clear ice, and it can be incredibly difficult to spot.
So, Mark, we've talked about big planes. We've talked about kind of the what's on the Airbus, and both kind of Airbuses are largely the same, aren't they? The wide body and the narrow body. But let's talk a little bit about other airplanes. How do they get their ice off? Like, I go flying in a little single engine airplane. So do you. How do you get the ice off your little airplane?
Yeah. Okay. Well, the gold standard, because it's ice prevention more than ice removal, is a thing called TKS, and that is a fluid-based de-icing system. So if you fly Cirrus or fancy, there's certain Malibus and Bonanzas you can have it retrofit to. And the only way I can describe it is the leading edge is like an electric shaver foil. It has tiny pinholes.
Oh, wow.
And there's a tank of fluid in the airplane, and that gets pumped out and gets forced out and just kind of oozes out in a very fine liquid, and you can actually see the fluid flowing back across the wing there. Now, obviously, you've got to pop it on preemptively, because if you get the front of the wing iced up, then it's not going to come out the little holes. But that's a very effective system. What else have we got?
So what do we have on bigger planes then? Sort of turboprops, business airplanes, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so boots, what are known as boots. So sometimes you'll walk out to an airplane if you're connecting flighters on a smaller airplane. It might have boots, and you'll see black leading edges. and they are rubber. So that's a rubber cuff around the leading edge. Typically, they're pneumatic, and they have multiple little little expansive bladders in them, and they ridge up. And the idea is that they kind of break that ice surface, and then it'll all fall off. Once it starts falling off, it gets blown away and comes off completely. I can tell you now that aeroplane there has not been effective at removing ice, because you can see ice behind the boot surface there.
Yeah, it does look like the boot surface has actually been used though, because of you can almost see the ridges in the ice. So it's been working pretty hard, but that's a lot of ice.
That is a lot of ice. And actually, Scott, because it's a great picture to show, one of the things that happens as the airplane's accumulating ice in flight, you can see, as you say, that longitudinal breaking of the ice where they've been doing their best. And these boots kind of cycle in and out, in and out. But as the airplane slows down, there's a chance that ice will start to form on the area that's not protected. And it looks like that's exactly what's happened under that wing there. In which case, your only hope is to find warmer air.
So, Mark, somebody was talking about, and I'm going to leave this picture up for the moment. Someone was talking about, some of the commenters on Twitter were talking about run back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know what that is, but can you explain to the viewers what run back is all about?
Yeah, so it's typically melting and refreezing. And we can theorize that on this airplane that a little bit of that might have happened. The big issue with it is if it misses the area that's that's de-iced or that's got protection on it. On our airplanes, on larger airplanes, most likely area that's going to happen in is the area of the fuel tanks. So the fuel will be a little bit warmer. The ice will form on the underside of the fuel tanks, melt a little bit, and then in the cold weather, that ice will then refreeze. And the problem, of course, then you get is unequal distribution of ice, and then this ridging effect, which of course is spoiling that lovely smooth aerodynamic shape.
Thanks, mate. A really great explanation of, perhaps, I know we theorized there about what was going on with that picture, but it that looks really bad icing on that airplane. So when
there'll be a couple of pilots who have had probably taken themselves straight off to the nearest adult beverage vendor, I should imagine, after that flight.
Yeah, I would, seeing that. So when I tweeted that video out the other day, Mark, the one that we saw at the top of the show, I implored anyone traveling that if they saw that on the wing, they should bring it to the attention of the crew. Now, many replied saying they'd done similar things with stuff they were uncomfortable with, not necessarily icing, stuff they saw, people not selecting flaps before getting onto the runway, things like that. And some people have said, well, actually, I stopped something happening because I'd said it. Others also indicated that they'd be really, really frightened of speaking up, particularly at the moment where, anyone speaking up or standing up is seen to be disruptive. I just wondered, if you as a commander, what advice would you give anyone if they saw something that they weren't happy with, they were uncomfortable with? What would your advice be to them?
Of course, the way you raise it, if you suddenly leap up in the middle of the cabin, then of course the first thought might be that this person's not necessarily right in the mind. But if you raise it in good time and in a kind of sensible, respectful way, then of course someone's going to listen to you and they'll at least pass the message on. And this has happened to me. So I've been in a 767. I was trying to get to Dubai of all places, but from Heathrow, where it was very, very snowy. And the phone rang as we were taxiing off from the de-icing bay. And exactly that had happened. So someone had looked out out of the window, and we'd actually been out in the cabin to look at the wings. But one of the problems is the airplane was covered in de-icing fluid, and it's ever so difficult to see through the windows clearly. And as the de-icing fluid had slowly moved down the window, someone had looked out and saw a little heap of snow on the wing. And the cabin crew member phoned us and said there's a little heap of snow, and it was in an area that was difficult to see. That's why I mentioned it earlier. They'd been de-icing from the front. I think they just couldn't see the bit that they'd missed. And we went back. I actually never got to Dubai that day. I de-iced 3 times. And I went precisely nowhere in 8 hours. It was a hell of a night.
Wow. I have not had an icing issue because, as you know, in long haul, if it's snowy and icing, we go back to the hotel. No, that's a joke, by the way. But I have had numerous people phone up and say, we've seen something come out of the wing. You know, one of the more common ones is if you have been de-iced, when you get up to altitude, people very often see liquid, which they assume is fuel coming off the back of the wings. And we've always gone out, always looked, because guess what? It might be fuel.
Yeah.
And I would never, probably like you, I would never, ever, ever not go and have a look, because that could just be the one thing that actually we did miss, or the one thing that stops an incident. I would just encourage everyone to respectfully, if they see something that they're not comfortable with, just speak up. I don't think, on most airlines, I don't think that would be an issue.
No, we could be wrong, but I suspect not. Certainly, all of the larger airlines that I speak to on a more regular basis, going to be absolutely fine. They're going to be grateful for it.
They are. Now, we're coming to the end, Mark, and I've really enjoyed it, actually, talking about some cool stuff.
Interesting.
It's been quite good, hasn't it? Interesting.
Yeah.
Drop a bit of knowledge. We all remember ice pilots.
I love a bit of ice pilots.
I love a bit of ice pilots, a bit of Buffalo Airways.
Yeah.
Now, we talk about flying in ice. These guys are the masters of flying around in cold climates. In fact, they've prevented icing on this wing by covering it with tarpaulins.
Yeah.
Which is the simplest way to do it.
Yeah, and isn't that an interesting thing, you know, which is that there's all this high-tech stuff and these crazy fluids and things, but actually if you can put the airplane in a hangar or you can cover it up, then you prevent the problem generally in the first place. What you don't get is ice protection. So if is anti-ice, you know, as you're taxiing out.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a clear day there, but I couldn't go without showing this picture of Mikey McBrien from Buffalo Airways doing his own snow clearance with a broom on top of the airplane. And, you know, as you say, high tech to low tech. And I actually watched a video of them this afternoon where they were spraying the wing after they'd brushed the snow off, using something that you would, a sort of a weed killing pump that you use in your garden. It's just as effective.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah. I don't know. My big takeaways are for this, you know, clean wing. It's got to be symmetrical as well. We can't see everything. These are tough conditions, and also time. It's going to take time. This isn't your normal day.
So I hope everyone's enjoyed this. Been fun for us, I hope. I enjoyed it.
I have enjoyed it. Good merch, by the way.
Oh, it is good merch. This is all coming out soon, by the way, if anybody wants to buy the merch. I also hope everyone now realizes how outrageously dangerous it was to take off with the snow and wing on that aircraft in the video. Thankfully, those instances are rare, but they do happen. And we as pilots do our best to ensure that we use all the tools available to us to get the passengers and crew there safely and not end up in a position where we've got snow and ice on the wings like that. But as a traveling passenger, you out there also have your part to do. If you see something that doesn't look right, that you're uncomfortable with, then please do speak up and let us know. And hopefully we'll take that on board and reassure you that actually you are safe the aircraft safe and we can carry on our journey. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, big thumbs up, please. And don't forget to subscribe because our next knowledge drop might be on something that actually you might want to learn about. Mark, I've enjoyed it. Until next
thanks
time.
very much. Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Good night, everyone.